It is February 9th, 2008. It is 11:50 a.m. and I am Joan Sherman and I am interviewing Nell Mussler. And the purpose of this interview is to videotape and get an oral presentation of the information that will contribute to a significant history of Indialantic and the surrounding areas. Nell, would you please spell your name?
Yes, N-E-L-L, Nell Mussler, M-U-S-S-L-E-R.
Could you tell us a little about yourself and where you were raised and your family?
Yes, my family is from Georgia. We've lived there many generations since colonial times. And I was educated at the University of Georgia in Athens. And I came here to teach school in 1953, having graduated from the university.
And why did you choose this area over any other area?
Well, my cousin, Dr. B. Frank Brown, was principal of the high school here. And growing up in middle Georgia, coming to Florida and being near the beach was quite exciting.
So did you just pick up and leave your whole family, or there were relatives here that you
Yes.
could come to? You weren't just a lone traveler, so to speak.
Dr. Brown and his family lived in Indialantic, and he was my mainstay when I first came. Then I met other teachers who were single and young and just beginning their teaching career, and we bonded and lived together.
So who did you live with?
I lived with two girls from Alabama, and Patsy Odom Ream. Patsy and I had been at the University of Georgia, so we kind of came together and we met these other two girls from Alabama, and we shared an apartment.
And where was this apartment?
It was Orange Court Apartments on Melbourne Avenue, right near the school. We all taught, there was only one school in Melbourne at the time, in Melbourne Elementary, and that's where we taught.
So you lived in Melbourne for a while.
Yes, that's right.
And how did you get from Melbourne to Indialantic?
Well, we wanted to come to the beach. So the next year when we came, we found an apartment, a duplex. The duplex it's a house now, it's a one-family house, but the duplex was right behind what is Lily Park on Riverside Drive. Lily Park was just a sand spur patch at that time. In fact, that's where we parked our cars, but there was a duplex there. We had 4 teachers on one side, elementary teachers, and on the other side, there were 4 high school teachers.
And so you were, all this while you were still, even while you lived in Melbourne, you were teaching at Indialantic, right?
No, Indialantic had not been built then. We were still teaching. All of us taught at Melbourne Elementary and Melbourne High.
Then how did you get from Melbourne Elementary and the schools in Melbourne to a school in Indialantic?
Well, Indialantic wasn't built then. And in the meantime, I married and moved away. We went to Gainesville to live. My husband had just finished his service in the Navy in Korean War, and he had started school at the University of Florida. So when we married, we went to Gainesville, and we were there 3 years. When I came back, Indialantic Elementary was in full swing.
So you met a boy here.
I did.
And who was he and how was the boy here?
What year was
This
this?
was we married in 1955. Dr. Brown, my cousin, lived in Indialantic on Michigan Avenue, and across the street from the Browns lived the Musslers. And the second year I was here, I was introduced to Ed. He was going to the University of Florida at the time. We met and eventually married in 1955.
Then when you married him, he was still in school? Or
He was
Then before you married, you were a young, single, available woman
I
in
was.
Brevard County.
And it was a good time to be here. We had a lot of opportunities to have fun. There was Patrick Air Force Base and a lot of second lieutenants. And we enjoyed all of the festivities at the Officers Club, and the wonderful weather and the beach. So I felt like I had made a good choice in coming to Indialantic.
So what interest did you get that you didn't have in Georgia that you got because of the area that still continue to this day?
Well, it was a small town atmosphere, and I just enjoyed the geography of it, the beauty and the proximity to the ocean. The people were so friendly. The people in Melbourne were so friendly, and they were so excited about having young teachers come to town. I think that must have been kind of a novelty. We would walk around the streets of Melbourne, and the people would come out and greet us, and everybody was just so warm and friendly toward us. It was a happy time.
So when you met your husband, then you left to go to the University of Florida?
Yes, we went.
What year was that?
1955, and I taught school in Gainesville. I taught at J.J. Finley.
And how long did you stay in Gainesville?
3 years. My first child was born in Gainesville.
And how many children do you have?
Have 3.
And did you return here after Gainesville, or did you go someplace else?
When Ed graduated from college, we came back to this area in 1959, and I was overwhelmed at the changes that had happened in those 3 years. This had bludgeoned into a small, big town. It was hard to find a place to live. There were not very many houses for rent, but we wanted to live in either Indialantic or Melbourne Beach. So we found a little house in Melbourne Beach and bought it, and I've lived on the same street ever since.
So then when were your children born?
My daughter was 3 when we came back, and then I had another daughter born in 1962, and then my son was born in 67.
And did you continue teaching through that, or how did that affect your teaching career?
I didn't go back to teaching. I took a little time off, and I didn't go back to teaching until 1963. But I managed to raise my children and do all the necessary things and continue with my teaching career.
And can you recollect any of the other people that taught with you at that time? Names of any of the other people?
Oh yes, I can. In fact, they're still my very good friends. Marianne Robinson, her husband had Robinson Insurance Agency. She taught with me for a long time. And Jan Johnston, Nadine Durham, Catherine Maddox Butterfield. They've all remained my very dear friends.
And what grades did you teach?
Taught all of the grades, but first grade was my favorite.
And do you know any people? Can you recollect any of the people that you had in first grade?
Well, yes. My first year, no, I guess it was my second year teaching at Melbourne Elementary. I taught Kent Broom, and he's in Indialantic and has a great deal to do with the running of the town. Not the running of the town, but the Heritage Center, I'm sure.
Okay, and anybody else that you can recollect teaching in any of the grades that have stayed here or have become famous?
Yes, I'm sure I can, but give me a moment and I'll think about that. In fact, I had started on my second generation of parent and children.
You still see them around town?
Yes, I do. Mm-hmm.
Now, I have a question. What was Indialantic like at this time in your life? What was the town,
Well,
feeling of the community?
Fifth Avenue was like a neighborhood. There were homes on Fifth Avenue. And that was one of the things that startled me when I came back, because when I came back, Fifth Avenue had changed completely. It was now a business area. But the homes were gone, But when I first moved here, there were many homes on the street, and the Presbyterian Church was here. It was quite small, not the big. And of course, Nance Park wasn't here. Nance Park was where the Bahama Beach Club was, and a little sundry store, Branny's, I think they called it. And but the Trade Winds was always here, and a wonderful place to have parties and wedding receptions.
And did you ever have anything or do anything at the Bahama Beach Club?
Oh yes, my father-in-law belonged to it, and when we would come back for weekends, he would always take us there, and we could go swimming. It had a beautiful pool, and a lovely view of the ocean, a glass front looking out over the ocean.
And what organizations do you belong to now? Are you still working?
No, I retired in 1993. I'm a treasurer of the DAR, and I belong to the United Daughters of the Confederacy, the Daughters of 1812. I'm the secretary for the Friends of the Library, Melbourne Library.
As a young married couple in the Indialantic area, what did you and your husband do for extracurricular activities?
Well, there was always something going on at the Trade Winds. I think every organization in this area had a dance there, and that was fun. Panhellenic had their dance there, and the JCs, and that was the Trade Winds was kind of a vital part of our entertainment.
And did your husband work at that time?
Oh yes, he was employed. He worked for North American and several contractors at
This was at the base?
Mm-hmm, and the Cape.
And how did you feel that the space age changed or influenced the growth and the atmosphere of Indialantic? Did you see anything significant at that point?
Well, yes, the creation of NASA changed this whole area. When I first came here in '53, I'm not sure exactly about the population, but I think there must have been about 20,000 people in all of Brevard County. And when we came back in '59, there were about 20,000 people in '53 when I came to teach, and I think today it's about 500,000.
What were the size of your classes at the school in Melbourne versus Indialantic? Were they the same size classes?
Yeah, they were quite large. Quite large. I had about 36, 37 students in Melbourne. And then when I started teaching at Indialantic in '63, the classes were very large. We were on double session. They were building Ocean Breeze and Holland Elementary. So we had Indian Harbor Beach attending Indialantic as well as Melbourne Beach.
Had they built Hoover?
No.
Yet?
No.
When did they build Hoover, do you know?
Hoover must have, I think they were building Hoover at that time.
And so where did the children go before Hoover?
I think they went,
And then they started going.
and then they started going to Hoover.
How was shopping in that era? I mean, in the '50s, and when you first came here, where did you shop?
Well, there was nothing to shop out here. There were no, our Galley Boulevard, we were just ecstatic over that. But everybody shopping. It was, and at that time, it was, you would open up if there were sailboats coming and couldn't get through.
You were married here in Brevard County?
No, I was married in Georgia, in
So
Griffin,
you
my
went back
home.
to Georgia to get married.
Mm-hmm.
Is there anything else you would like to tell us about?
I'm sure there's a lot more that I would like to share with you. And maybe when I go home, I'll think of all of these things that I should have said that. But right now, I can't. But there was one little point I wanted to make. When I first came here, it was quite a shock when I came and saw Melbourne, and it was just a small little town, little sun-baked town. I came in August. Of course, there was no air conditioning anywhere, but I was used to no air conditioning. But I was not used to the intense heat, and it was intense. And I said, and I said to my friend Patsy, I said, Patsy, I don't know. We'll stay here a year and see how things go. So then we drove over the bridge and into Indialantic, and I saw that beautiful ocean. And I said, I think maybe we can stay here. And we've been here ever since.
And what do you think primarily, besides the ocean, keeps people in Indialantic the length of time? Because there are people that we've talked to that go away and they come back, and you've been here so long, and some of the other people. What really made you stay here? Why didn't you retire in Arizona or someplace else? Was it just the ocean? Or?
Oh, well, no, by the time I retired, my friends were here, and I just couldn't imagine living anywhere else in spite of the hurricanes every fall. This was home. It's beautiful, just a wonderful place to live.
And what do you think of Indialantic and Melbourne Beach in this area now compared with, let's say, in the 50s or the 60s?
Well, I don't like to see all the encroaching businesses come. I would like to see our communities staying just like they are now. We've had enough growth, enough buildings, enough new enterprises, so it would suit me perfectly if we didn't make any other moves. Just stay like we are.
I had a question about, you said you drove over the bridge and saw the ocean for the first time. Was that the first bridge, or that wouldn't have been the first bridge? It would have been probably the second bridge at that point.
Yes, it was not the wooden bridge.
Right.
I think the first bridge was wooden.
Right.
Okay.
But
But it had a draw that went out, opened out.
Do you remember? And again, over here. Do you remember when they built the big span?
Yes, I do. And I don't remember the date, but I remember that they just built it going over, I think going over to the west. And then we still had the drawbridge on the other side. And then they built both, and then they made it both sides.
Well, your husband's father was in politics, wasn't he? Did you get involved in any of that while you lived here, or did your husband?
No, he didn't. And I think I might have influenced him not to. He was very active with the JCs. He was president of the JCs, and I could have influenced him. He was asked several times to run for the council in Melbourne Beach, and I discouraged that.
Can you tell us why? Did you think that would take away from something in your life?
I did, and I just didn't think we needed it at the time. I thought we had other things that were rather important then.
Now, your children went to Indialantic Elementary, or did they? What elementary school did they?
They went to my oldest daughter went to Indialantic. There was no Gemini then, but when she was in the 5th grade, Gemini was built. So she went to Gemini, and my other children did too. And we only live about a half a mile from Gemini. And I thought about going to Gemini to teach school, but I just didn't want to leave Indialantic. I had such a close attachment to this community and the children and the teachers. So I sent my children on to Gemini, but I remained at Indialantic, and I think it's a good choice. I thought about bringing my children with me to Indialantic, but I think children need to go to school in their neighborhoods. So we had a good rapport then. They were in Gemini, I was in Indialantic.
You talked about the heat, and now the houses, most of them are air conditioned. Do you remember when you first moved back here with your husband and you moved into the home in Melbourne Beach, was that air conditioned or was that still not air conditioned?
It was not air conditioned. In fact, when I moved in that home in Melbourne Beach, we didn't have city water then. We had a well. We had two wells, a deep well to water your lawn and a shallow well which needed a pump to use for your household needs.
When did you get water?
We got water in the about 62, 63, they brought water out to our area.
Do you know in that time, did Indialantic already have water at that time?
Indialantic did.
I see. And the sewers?
Sewage came, that must have come about 10 years later.
So the water came first and then the sewage?
Yes.
And the air conditioner came?
The air conditioning came as just a necessity. You know, we bought another house on Surf Road. When we first came here, right after college, we bought a little house, a little house on Surf Road. There were only about 5 or 6 houses on the street then. And then they started building other houses on Surf Road, so we just moved up the street into one of those houses, and that was air conditioned. But Indialantic Elementary did not get air conditioning for a long time. They were building all of the other schools. Ocean Breeze was air conditioned. All of the new schools on the mainland, all the new schools were air conditioned, but we remained cooled by fans. But finally, and not too far from the time, away from the time I retired, Indialantic became air conditioned.
Is there anything else you can recollect about the town at that time that you thought, you think would be of special interest?
No, not right now. I can only say that it's been a wonderful place to live and to raise my family.
Yeah, I have a question. Now, you were saying how you like Indialantic and Melbourne Beach, but you don't want big business coming
Yes.
in. How do you see, or where would you like for Indialantic and Melbourne Beach to be, say, in 10 years? What do you
Well,
see?
I would like for it to remain just like it is. I know it's not. Right now, Melbourne Beach is facing the onslaught of Walgreens coming in, and I see our small little stores having to close up.
If there's nothing else that either Denise or would like to, then, and nothing else, then I think I'd like to thank you for spending the time with us this morning. And it's been very interesting, and I'm glad that you stuck around Indialantic.
Well, I am too, and it's been very pleasant reminiscing about it. I thank you for having me.